Good morning and greetings from Vertex Partnership Academies in the Bronx. Now that you've had a chance to see a snippet of my school, I'm excited to discuss how to inspire the rising generation to embrace agency and reject victimhood. But before we look forward, let's step back. These are my parents, Vincent and Eula Rowe, on their wedding day in 1957 in London. After having my brother and I, both born in Islington, we ultimately came to the United States in 1968, a very tumultuous time in America, particularly on the issues of race. But my parents weren't running away from their original home in Jamaica or England. They were running to the United States in search of the American dream and opportunities that my parents believed that were laid out for us. Fast forward to today, a very different message is being sent to young people across the country. 3 weeks ago, the journal Education Next released a national survey of high school students asking what messages they have heard from teachers over the last 4 years. Stunningly, 70% of high school students report that their teachers say that, quote, America is a fundamentally racist nation, end quote. With nearly 40% of students say they hear that message often or almost daily. What happens to a nation when its schools express to its students such disdain and selective memory of its own country? My colleague, Catherine Burbelsing, who runs the Michaela Community School, sums it up well when she says, "The West won't fall in Parliament, it will fall in the classroom." After a while, these messages do take their toll. Indeed, since 1976, a large national representative survey has asked United States high school seniors whether or not they agree with this statement. Despite its many faults, America's system of doing things is still the best in the world. In the early 1980s, nearly 70% of high school seniors agreed with that statement. In 2022, that number fell to 27%. We are convening at a time when the American dream, and in several Western nations, are in peril. But we have a moral responsibility to let young people know, especially those that are struggling, that the dream is real and that their life can be their own. But we have to let them know how. Towards this end, Harvard University conducted a study that analyzed the tax records for more than 40 million children and their parents. Their core sample consisted of all children in the United States born between 1980 and 1982, whose income was measured in 2011 and 12, when they were approximately 30 years old. Harvard created a map, the geography of upward mobility, showing the locations in which children born into families in the lowest 20% of income were most likely to have incomes in the top 20% as adults 30 years later. This is the map. The lighter the color, the greater the likelihood of upward mobility. Clearly, intergenerational mobility varies substantially across America, and while we are all governed by national policies, given the variation, clearly what matters most in terms of upward mobility is what happens locally. The study describes the United States as a collection of societies, some of which are lands of opportunity with high rates of mobility across generations, and others that experience persistent inequality places in which few children escape poverty. Now, what is it that ties these lands of opportunity together? The study cites three characteristics. First, quote, "The strongest predictors of upward mobility are measures of family structure, such as the fraction of single parents in the area. Second, high upward mobility areas tend to have higher fractions of religious individuals and greater participation in local civic organizations. And third, proxies for the quality of the K-12 school system are also correlated with mobility." It's no coincidence that these high rates of family stability, exemplified by married, two-parent households, concentration of religious faith, and access to high-quality K-12 education, are strongly correlated to upward mobility at the neighborhood level. For 30 years, I have worked with kids from every conceivable background. I've seen children growing up in challenging situations, from poor kids experiencing domestic violence to privileged kids suffering severe depression, who unfortunately succumb to those same conditions and unfortunately recreate them as they enter young adulthood. But I have also seen kids under those same exact conditions make different sets of decisions that put them on a different trajectory to break the cycle of disadvantage. The question is, what makes the difference? What makes the difference? That is the animating question of my life. My observation is that students that have been able to break the cycle of disadvantage typically had a sense of personal agency, a belief that they could lead a self-determined life of meaning and purpose. But the sense of agency didn't come from nowhere. They didn't just pull themselves up by their bootstraps. In my observation over 30 years, young people able to break the cycle of disadvantage usually interacted with what I consider are the four key pillars of human flourishing, what I call free: family, religion, education, and entrepreneurship. Let's start with family. The young people that I've seen able to break the cycle of disadvantage recognize that regardless of the dysfunction about the family that they were from, what mattered most is the family that they were on the pathway to form. As you saw in the video, we have a class called Pathways to Power in which we teach the success sequence. This is data that says if a young person completes just a high school degree, then gets a full-time job so they learn the dignity and discipline of work, and then if they have children, marriage first. 97% of millennials avoid poverty, and the vast majority enter the middle class or beyond. That is information young people need to know. The second pillar of free is religion. The young people I've observed who were able to break the cycle of disadvantage typically had a personal faith commitment. They lived by a moral code. They had a sense of right versus wrong, usually informed by an organized religion. Christianity, Buddhism, Judaism almost didn't matter, but what was most important was that they were part of a community of people that loved them and expected them to live up to this moral code. The third pillar of free is education. Young people able to break the cycle of disadvantage usually benefited from some type of educational freedom or school choice. And the final and fourth pillar of free is entrepreneurship. If the first three are there on the path, you're on the pathway to form a strong family, have a personal religious faith commitment, and have benefited from educational freedom, then you typically have an entrepreneurial mindset, a work ethic, a future orientation. To bring free to life in our school, Vertex Partnership Academies is organized around the four cardinal virtues of courage, justice, temperance, and wisdom. These are the root virtues upon which all other standards of moral excellence depend: resiliency, determination, perseverance, optimism. All of those emanate from the four cardinal virtues. And for each cardinal virtue, we require our students to memorize what we call I statements as part of the process to internalize their sense of personal agency. So please indulge me for a moment and think 3,000 miles away with our students who are reciting these, and I'd like you to recite courage with me, to get the sense of what our students feel when they're reciting these words in unison. So I'll say courage, and then we'll start I reject. Courage. I reject victimhood and boldly persevere, even in times of uncertainty and struggle. It's like goosebumps. Let's do temperance. I lead my life with self-discipline because I am responsible for my learning and behavior. So the idea is first they grasp the virtues in their head and ultimately grasp it here in their heart. Let me close by quoting Alexis de Tocqueville, who said that the greatness of America lies not in being more enlightened than any other nation, but rather in her ability to repair her faults. I find this statement compelling because it suggests our country, through its founding documents, like the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, that all of these have within itself, the country within itself, has the tools of self-renewal, the power of self-betterment, a story that still needs to be told. At Vertex, each morning, our students recite the preamble to the Constitution to remind them that we are the people to shape the future, that theirs is still a story to be told. The goal is to instill within our students that they also have these tools of self-betterment and self-renewal within themselves, that they live in a good, if not great, country that is not hostile to their dreams, but in fact can help make those dreams come true if they live with virtue as architects of their own lives. Thank you.